Welcome back from Mike to Market. I am sitting here with my good friend Bill. We're going to talk about podcasting, social media, and how it could help promote your business. Or it could be a passion project, which is kind of like your project, right?
Absolutely.
So why don't we start by telling us, give me your commercial about your podcast.
Sure, yeah. So the podcast is called Coffee and Change. I started it about 9 years ago. It is very much a passion project. But what I found fascinating about this passion project, it sort of emerged and has evolved into something where I continue to learn about it, about myself, about my guests. So the concept is essentially two people that sit down as if you were to have a cup of coffee. You ask a friend or a colleague, hey, let's grab a cup of coffee. And usually what ends up happening is you have a common topic, but what emerges is you tell your story.
Yeah.
And it's called Coffee and Change because where it stemmed from was I was actually working at the University of Washington helping people go through a lot of big change in their careers. And inevitably people would sort of nod and say, yes, I'm okay with this after I was speaking on stage or giving a presentation. And then they would come up to me afterwards and say, hey, can I get you for a minute? And I'd say, sure, what's going on? And they said, I'm not okay with this. And I sensed in them sort of a hesitation or a vulnerability. And I would immediately say to them, hey, do you want to go grab a cup of coffee? And they said, yeah, let's go do that. So it emerged.
Disarming, right?
Yes, totally disarming. Just, meet them where they're at,
Yeah.
right? It's a very human thing to do. And what ended up happening was they would tell their story, who they were, where they came from, why they were worried about this change. And afterwards, they felt 100% better. And I would say to them, how do you feel now? And they said, I'm totally good. And it occurred to me that if only I could record those conversations, because chances are if they were going through it, then one of their peers was, or one of their bosses was.
Yeah.
And that's just the human dilemma, right? So that's where it emerged is I said, what if I could record some of these conversations about people going through change? And usually it occurs through three lenses: change in your life, change in your work, or change in the world, through one of those. And that was 9 seasons ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
How many episodes is that?
I'm definitely over 150 episodes at this point. I kind of, not that I lost track or lost count. Obviously, the count because when you manage it, you have to know what episode it is. But after that many, the gift of it is it sort of flows. And I'm now to a point where I don't worry so much about the number of episodes. I don't even worry about how many times I record. For me, it's like there's a drum beat and it's a bit of a heartbeat for me. I know when I've gone too long without connecting with someone, without hearing their story. And the great thing about it now, Rob, is that I don't really have to do much advertising. It very much is word of mouth. Former guests will reach out to friends of theirs or say, I had this really powerful experience with Bill and you should talk to him for these reasons. And so it sort of feeds itself in a beautiful, endearing way.
That's awesome. And again, you're not out for, this is a passion project of yours. You're not out to monetize. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's just your goal was about your connection. Yeah. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing about podcasts is that anyone who starts them will quickly learn that as you evolve and learn and grow in this ecosystem, it will teach you a lot about yourself, but also the industry, about technology, about people. And for me, it was always about connection, and it sort of emerged as this curricula for lessening loneliness in the world. And it never really felt to me that I wanted to monetize that. Now, I will say that I do get approached by sponsors every once in a while to say, hey, we really like what you're putting out there. We think it's distinct, it's unique, it's powerful. We'd love to sort of attach to that brand. And I do reserve, maybe once a year to think about that and consider that. But every year I've arrived at, that doesn't seem right for where I'm at right now. And that's okay.
Sure.
I think for me, it's also a really good feeling to not be beholden to anything or anyone. I don't have a boss in this. I am the host. I am the producer. I'm the editor. I do it all myself. I think that's also where I'm to the point to think about where maybe I need to up that game a little bit. Do I want to bring on a producer at some point? Do I want to explore physical, locations for recording like this? Those are all things I do think about. I think a lot of us did most of this work during the pandemic. I started mine back in 2016. So 2016 to
You're a pioneer.
yeah, it's a long time ago.
Yeah.
You know, the field has changed so much. And if I think back to what I thought it was going to be in 2016 to what it has become now, I couldn't have predicted that, but it's a beautiful journey. And for me, it feels right. It's heart currency for me right now. I don't think I could put actual currency value on it. That might change. I mean, people have approached me and said, you should turn it into a book. You should turn it into a course. You should give it over to a university and monetize it in that way. Those are all possibilities in the future, but right now it feels right to stay a passion project.
And, you know, I was telling you the premise for this podcast was, you know, we, as part of our other business, work with a lot of real estate brokers, right? And to get in the game from a social media perspective, you know, things are shifting. Gone are the days where you're mailing out postcards to advertise yourself, that type of stuff. People still do that, and if that works for them, mazel tov.
Yeah.
But how can we help bridge that gap, right? And I think your point about connection is so important. I was telling you earlier about, you know, when I used to get in front of the camera by myself, I felt like that imposter syndrome because I had nothing coming back at me to say, yeah, that worked. That, you know, it was just me reciting a script basically, and that's why it kind of petered out for me because I had nobody to play off of or connect with, right?
Right.
And we think about real estate brokers as an example. You know, the big three things they need to do to get other clients or referrals is to find somebody that likes, knows, and trusts them, right? And what better way to do that is by showing them, hey, this is how I connect, right? And it doesn't have to be a, you know, talking head at the camera. If that works, right? And hey, here's some stats about the market, great. But I think I'm going to bet money that if they're having those videos plus videos where they're connecting with whomever, right? And talking about whatever topic, that's going to play better and get a better return from a person who says, oh, I found you on YouTube and I really need help selling my house or whatever the you know, pulling it back into the real estate industry. So my long-winded way and rambling way of saying that's kind of the point of this podcast. But I think, again, to underscore, I think the power of that connection is so important. Yeah. And I don't mind the talking head video, but this is more authentic to me. And this is what content I consume.
Right. And I think, you know, when you talk about like, know, and trust, I mean, those are all things that if people think about those words, just as you say them and as I repeat them, they evoke an emotion in you. They evoke a sensation. And I've never purchased a home. I've never sold a home. But I do know something about making a large investment, making a large purchase. And any of those things, when you think about the combination of the emotion that goes into money, right? The emotion that goes into the concept of home and the emotion that goes into the concept of legacy. Like all three of those bring up a sense of, you know, deep resonance sense of who am I? Where do I want to be in the world? And what is the legacy I want to leave in the world? And to me, when I think about real estate brokers or agents or those that are involved in this ecosystem, those are all at the table, like all the time. How do you convey that in a newsletter? Right? How do you convey that in a billboard? Those are very one-dimensional, two-dimensional in some cases experiences. I would argue, to your point, if I'm watching a series of YouTube videos, maybe with the real estate broker or an agent who's talking about the type of places, but more importantly, the moments they've created with people, with families, with people who want to start their life or think about their legacy in retirement, those are the things that, to me, I'm going to gravitate towards. And I think every listener is in the same boat, right? They want something that magnetizes them because you're going to make a big decision. Like these are not small decisions in life. So it's not a small decision. It shouldn't be a small canvas, in my opinion. Something like this is the expansion of the canvas of what I call the human condition. We have to somehow figure out, how do we relate? How do we connect? How do we envision? And how do we dream?
And 100%. I would add to that list, it's a little negative slant, but how do we do some myth busting?
Absolutely.
Brokers get a bad reputation because they're the people they're out there for the deal, the commission, right? And it really, and what I learned at the two different brokerages I've worked at is you've got to be, your mindset has to be, I'm doing what's in best interest of my client.
Yep.
And to your point about the one-dimensional type thing, that's hard to convey that.
Yeah.
That, yes, I'm the person that's going to do that for you, right?
Yeah, and I think part of what makes the magic of that work is how you bring somebody's unique story to life. And this is what business is. I mean, every business is sort of planting a dream in somebody's mind and having themselves be able to see themselves living out that dream, whether it's a piece of technology or a home or an experience or a cruise or whatever it is. Yeah. If you can convey that in such a way that they can close their eyes and envision themselves there, then you've won half the battle, right? And we could debate about marketing, we could debate about sales, we could debate about all those things, but at the heart of it, it's sort of tugging on your soul, right? To make you make a decision. And I personally think, I would love it if I worked with a real estate broker or an agent who met me there, who said, you know what, I'm going to do things differently. I know I have to this is the recipe of success, what people have told me in the past, but I'm going to find my own way. I'm going to find my authentic voice, and I'm going to find my way to connect with people because I want to create moments and memories, frankly, in their life. I personally believe that if you do that, you won't ever have to look for a client again.
Yeah.
The clients will go out and find you clients. And that's a little bit what has happened in the podcast world is word of mouth is so powerful, especially in this attention economy. I mean, I would argue that we are in a famine of attention right now in this world. On average, 3 to 4 seconds is what you have to capture somebody's attention. On the flip side of that, what's really fascinating about what we're seeing in the world of podcasting is long-form podcasting is making some serious impacts in people's lives. We don't necessarily need to talk about politics per se, but, it goes without saying that long-form podcasting played a significant role in this last election.
Okay.
And I don't necessarily think that people understand the power of inviting somebody on a mic and having them talk from a place of unfettered vulnerability for 2.5 to 3 hours. Now that's sort of mind-blowing to us because we think, well, who has 2.5 to 3 hours to listen to it? Well, according to Joe Rogan and his listeners, 145 million people spent that time listening to whoever was on the mic at that time. Same thing with Lex Friedman and other people. Again, I don't necessarily agree or stand by the guests they've had on, but you can't debate the fact that people are listening, tuning in, and making decisions from that place.
Sure.
So if that's happening, the question is to pose to everyone, every business, every entrepreneur, do you have a story to tell? Do you have questions that might allow people to open up and tell their story? And as a result, be it listeners or customers or potential investors would be interested in making an investment with you.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's funny, we were talking yesterday about how when you're sitting in the sofa in the chair and you got the mic, all of a sudden 2 hours goes by and you're like that. What just happened, right?
Right.
And then from, if we do get just a little technical and the beauty of technology, and you and I were talking about AI before, you can take that if you're trying to market yourself, you can take that and AI will chop that up, so will we, into nuggets that make sense, right? So they're clips that you can then market to then drive traffic to the long form content. Should somebody say, wow, that resonated with me. It doesn't always have to be a funny clip or a meme or whatever, right? It can be something poignant or, again, just to capture that 30 seconds with somebody. And they're like, wow, I actually want to know more because of that.
Yeah, it's an and, not an or.
Yeah.
And I think the power of what you're saying is that, again, embracing technology for an outcome. Mindful, but for an outcome. The AI example is a great one. If we have all of this content, we think humanely that we have the ability to go through and slice and dice. And for many, many years, there were producers and editors that did that, spent countless hours doing that. What ends up on the cutting room floor, what ends up in the actual final product. And people that do that beautifully. But time is a currency. And if you can actually, sort of like looking for a needle in a haystack, right? Have AI be the magnet that you hold over the haystack and the needle pops out. There's your 10-second clip, right? That is going to be the attention grabber that keeps people in or says, I want to learn more. I also think you got to strike a balance there, because we are in this attention economy. And if you over-index too much, and we've seen this on YouTube where people have, they have the splash reel, and they continue to, there's shorts and there's reels and there's all of these things that have our attention. But when saturated, you could over-index and you can lose people, right? You could get a whole bunch of people, potential customers, that actually want to go further.
Yeah.
That you've got them on the line and they're wanting more. And then to snap it away like that is a very disjointed experience. So striking that balance is key. I think AI is helpful, but I personally think, and I spend a lot of time in this in my work and in my life and writing about this, always keeping the human at the center is imperative, especially in this world.
100%. I think a couple of things that popped to mind for me. You talked about attention, right? And if I think, just tying it quickly back to real estate, in King, Snohomish, and Pierce County, there's over 5,600 real estate brokers.
Yeah.
And they're all trying to be out there, right? To whatever degree, right?
Yeah.
And how do you set yourself apart by not, okay, I'm posting another open house picture on my Instagram, and it's really not doing anything other than to get the 20 other brokers that follow me to click like. It's really not driving me business, right? So what other venue or medium could you use and put into that equation that actually gives somebody some value, but also creates that connection? And that's the attention you want. That follows all of that, right?
Right, yeah.
So I think that's important. The other thing too, you just made me think, and I was telling you about, I've invited this YouTuber to be a guest on this show. God willing, she responds. If you're watching, Jen, I'd love to have you. But she is a Gen Xer, so I relate to her all of her stuff. She's an introvert. I'm an introvert. But she set out, she's like, I'm going to start a YouTube channel. And it's her with 2 shows a week. And to your point, I don't see like the lots of the shorts and stuff. It's just she's been very consistent since January of 24, or this year, to now. She set out, my goal, to go back to that before again, is to monetize my YouTube channel. This will be my little pet project side hustle, sharing stories about her life, about whatever topic she wants. And by the way, it's called Silver and Solo. That's her channel. But she's now at 89.5 thousand subscribers. She's monetized and brings in a healthy amount of money. And this is evergreen content, right?
Yeah.
Which that's the other beauty of it. It's not just, oh, happy Halloween from your favorite real estate person. Right. It's valuable content that keeps, and the beauty of technology, and I'm sure it's on other platforms as well, but in YouTube, you can see that video made you X dollars.
Right.
And it just sits there and it just grows and grows and grows over time. And remind me, is your podcast on Spotify and all that?
It is, yeah. So it's on Spotify and Apple and I think Amazon, and at one point it was on Google. I don't know if Google's still doing the podcast thing. They might have sunset that. But what's interesting about...
I think that moved over to YouTube.
Did it move over to YouTube? Okay, perfect. I actually have to explore that, honestly. I got a nudge recently from Google about that, saying, hey, you can put the RSS feed to YouTube. And initially, I probably just dismissed that because I haven't done video to date. But I learned that you can actually just RSS feed it so that you just put a graphic on there and then they listen to the audio. So that's something I do have to explore. Thank you for reminding me that. 2 points you made earlier.
I'm here to help.
Yeah, I appreciate that. What I love about that story from Jen's perspective is 2 things. One is you mentioned evergreen content. I think this is really important to sort of reiterate to those that are listening is a lot of times stories and human connection stories and testimonies, right? These are evergreen content because they stand on their own. They actually go outside the barriers of time and space, if you will. And those are things that I've noticed in my many years of doing this that attract people to listen because they can, again, envision themselves in that. And they'll say things like, that exact experience happened to me. Or they'll say things like, I thought I was the only one. When in fact, it's quite the opposite. We are very much like each other as humans. We sometimes forget that. And these remind us of that level of, similarities that we have. So that's one. I think the other part is around being an introvert. I'm also an introvert. Shock. I know. Listen,
We're in
it's
front
like,
of 3 cameras.
Here we are, like cameras and mics, and we're talking to each other, and be like, there's no way this man's an introvert. But I am. And one of the things that I think it's really important to remind people is that introvert or extrovert, it really has to do with how you recharge. It's not necessarily how you perform. And so, yes, there's a mic in front of me. Yes, we're talking in front of cameras. I perform in my job very much as an extrovert, but I restore as an introvert. You are probably very much the same. And I wouldn't be surprised if many people out there that are making really good income doing this type of work, be it on YouTube or podcast with video or without video, I wouldn't be surprised if many of them are in fact the same sort of balance of performing as an extrovert, but truly an introvert. And I think it's because my hypothesis is partly informed by most of the ones that are getting that really deep connection. They're asking questions from a deep sense of discernment, right? They've spent time on their own thinking about and wondering. There's a level of wonderment and imagination and creativity that's just innate in this work. And I think there's a lot of other professions that wish they had permission to do that. Well, I'm here to say, do it. Like, don't wait. Do it and see what happens. I believe that you will actually get more leads. You will get more income. You will get more customers because they will appreciate that about you. I recently had a guest speaker. I was at an offsite, and this guest speaker said to a bunch of us, the best way to succeed in really complex organizations, and many times the organizations that we're all in, right, they're kind of matrix. Like, I have this boss, but I have that boss. Yep. And I imagine it's the same in real estate, right? You've got regional brokers, you've got investors.
Or you're on an island by yourself.
Or you're on an island by yourself.
Yeah.
You're an entrepreneur. And this person's advice was so powerful. She said, the best way to succeed is show up as yourself, authentically. And we were talking about this a little bit before, which is that sort of imposterism that many of us suffer. And it's true. If you show up as yourself, profoundly unique as yourself, you don't have to worry about what mask am I wearing today.
Right.
How am I shattering myself into 100 pieces to please 100 different people? Or what am I withholding? And to me, that level of honesty, authenticity, vulnerability in some cases, that is what is going to keep people interested in you and choose you to be, you know what, I want that person to represent me. I want that person to, in the case of real estate brokers, to go out and find a potential property that represents me and what I want. And I think those are new muscles. These are all new things, especially those of us that work in the corporate world and a little bit in the entrepreneur world. It's hard. It's hard to split the fence on both, but to me, that's where the magic lies.
Yeah, and I think the other thing you and I talked about before, and we both resoundingly agreed on, is stop comparing yourself to other people.
Yeah.
Right? Because what a viewer will sniff out inauthenticity instantly.
Yes.
And if you're out there trying to be like Tracy Tudor, who I love, and if you want to come on the show, Tracy, from $1 Million Listing LA, I would love that. But she's out there. She's very authentic. Yeah. I'm a huge Bravo fan. That should not surprise you. But don't try to be her. Right? Maybe glean from her how she runs her business, that type of stuff. But you do you. Yeah. And that's going to resonate with somebody else.
Yeah. I think that giving yourself that permission can be one of the most evolutionary and revolutionary things you can do. Be it if you're behind a mic or if you're talking to a potential client, just give yourself the grace to be you. And that comes with limitations and that comes with flaws, but it also comes with an incredible imagination, ideas that frankly can only come from inside and from a place of, again, wonderment, imagination, sometimes failings. Like there's a lot of failure that you can turn into brilliant creativity. I mean, think about most of the innovations that are probably in this room that we're using now stumbled out of a mistake. Right? Somebody said, well, what if we tried this and that didn't work? From that became the byproduct of what we use today. You know, in many cases, the iPhone was a mistake, and people forget that sometimes. So I think granting yourself that permission is one of the best gifts you can give yourself. as a solopreneur, it took me a really long time to call myself a creative. I used to point at everybody else, to your point, and say, I'm going to mimic that. I really like this style. I'm going to try what they do. And eventually, I found my own. I found my own stride, my own style, my own blend. And it was really hard for me at that point to call myself a creative. And I remember having a guest on years ago, and I kept calling them a creative and acknowledging others. And then I stopped. And they said, why did you stop? I thought you were going to finish it off with me too, and I am too. And I said, oh, no. And that's where the imposterism came in. I said, well, I'm not. At the time I was in consulting, I was like, I'm a consultant that sort of does this on the side. And she's like, no. And I was glad we recorded this. She said, no, I need you to stop, and I need you to hear me say you were absolutely a creative. And I need you to own that. And I remember sort of sitting in my skin for a while, being uncomfortable. Honestly, Rob, I was uncomfortable. And it took me a little bit of intention writing and some sitting down and writing it down and saying, sit with this. How does it make you feel? And I came through on the other side of that, and I totally embrace it, because what am I doing? I'm literally creating a platform. I'm creating connection. I was doing brand. Every episode, I actually do episode artwork for it. And a lot of people don't see that, because when you go and you look at the podcast, it's got the episode artwork. That's sort of the thumbnail. But I actually create individual episode artwork, and I share it with the guest so that they can use it to advertise if they want. And sometimes that's the most enjoyable part of it. I mean, the connections and the stories are amazing, and the editing I really enjoy as well. But trying to envision visually through all the tools we can have today, how do I capture the essence of the conversation that just changed my life?
Yeah.
And offer that up as literally a canvas to that person. That's a bit of the magic. And I never would have done that. I never would have allowed myself to do that had I not first said, yes, you are creative.
Nice. I think this makes me think of, if I am like a real estate broker listening to this or watching this, and there could be a bit of a duality from an intention here.
Yeah.
Yes, you can talk about what a great place Bellevue, Washington is to live, or what have you, adding in the stories about your family or whatever your story is, right? But it doesn't have to always be about that. It can just be about this conversation or what have you, because that's still, even if you're not talking about buying or selling a house or whatever it is associated with real estate, you're still letting somebody into your world that may spark that connection with somebody, or add them some value that they didn't know they wanted from their real estate broker, because a lot of my broker friends they become friends with their clients, right? Because there's that connection.
Yeah. One of the most beautiful parts of unexpected parts of being a podcast host, two things. One is people have surprised themselves by coming on and telling their story, and then it changed their life. So I've had people that have come on the show, told their story, and literally within 3 days quit their job and went to pursue the thing they've always wanted to do.
Nice.
Incredible. I never would have expected that. We didn't sit down with that intention, but that's what emerged. And secondly, I've had guests that have connected with other guests that otherwise never would have met in this life. When they send me a note and say, hey, you know what? I listened to Rob's story. I reached out. We've met. I've met their family. We've had coffee. We're now going into business. Whatever that is. I mean, there's nothing better for me than those stories.
Yeah.
Like no amount of money will come close to that for me personally. And you can't plan that. Like I can't put that on a strategic document and say, this is what I'm going to do. It has to be serendipitous. And I think in the world of, brokerage or real estate or whatever it is, that can happen.
Sure.
If you allow it to happen. Yep. Like let the magic happen and surprise yourself.
I love that. So I want to wrap up a little bit, but so if you were talking to somebody who is like, I don't know what would I, like, I've had brokers come in here and do Just Talk Studios and go, this is great. I love the studio. It looks great. I don't know what I would say.
Yeah.
Or I'm afraid. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, a few things come to mind. We are our own harshest critic. Initially, you're going to encounter resistance. That's just what happens. You put this thing in front of a person, you put cameras around, our shields go up.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. It's a moment of vulnerability. I think the advice I would give people is to allow enough space to surprise yourself and to learn from the experience, because you don't know how you'll emerge from something like this. You don't know what stories you'll tell. And when you embrace a little bit of that authenticity and vulnerability, your life will change.
Mm-hmm.
And just the slight frequency change of who you are and how you see the world and inviting in stories or creativity, that will echo out. And before you know it, it's a little bit of karma, in my opinion. It's like if you put in the goodness and the intention and you approach it from a place of creativity and grace and a little bit like a learning lab. I mean, turn it into a laboratory. You will be surprised at all of the gifts that come to you.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second piece of advice I would give to people that want to try this and might be a little bit nervous is don't worry about the sound of your own voice.
Totally.
It seems really minuscule, but we all get it. We can all relate to it. I would say that very tactically, it took me about 50 to 60 episodes.
Oh, wow.
Before that dissonance that occurs from us listening to our own voice goes away. I don't know if there's science behind it. This has just been my experience. But after about 50, 60 hours of hearing myself, that dissonance went away. So I would start to listen to myself, and most of us can experience that. Like, I don't sound like that, or that sounds weird, or I don't like the sound of my own voice. Eventually it goes away. And then you start to sound like yourself, and it's no longer inauthentic. Now, I'm not saying that everybody needs to spend 60 hours listening to themselves,
right.
But I say that from the standpoint of don't be surprised if in this experience you change, because your brain will change.
Yeah.
Your voice will change, your brain will change, your eyes will change, your ears will change because you're growing. That's the gift of this platform.
Just in closing, I love that. There is a guy out there named Sean Cannell. He's written a book called YouTube Secrets. He owns a company called Think Media. And the basis of his company is, how can I help others succeed in this space?
Yeah.
And he's analyzed YouTube, so in depth. But their quick intro to their videos is very simple. It's some background and like a camera or something, and it's somebody saying, you got to just hit record.
Yep.
And I was like, I remember saying like, yeah, get over yourself. Yeah. Right. And again, you're your own worst critic. Right.
Yeah.
So I love that. And it's a great book if you ever want to pick it up.
And if you don't put it out there, you will wonder. And as someone who has spent a lot of time in that place of, if only I had, don't do that to yourself. Like, don't live in that place of regret.
No.
Because it will haunt you for the rest of your life. And life is too short. Life is really, really brief if we think about it sort of on a cosmic level. And any level of vulnerability or embarrassment or any of that stuff, it will not come close to the level of regret you'll have for having wanted to do something that could have mattered. So go for it.
100%. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
So fun seeing you. Yeah. If you have liked this content, please, I'm going to do the YouTube thing. Please just click that like button. It does help us out. Subscribe. Leave us a comment in the description below. I was laughing with somebody. Somebody said, God lives in the comments. And maybe it's the devil sometimes. I don't know. But the comments are a treasure trove. But that is another way to connect too. So until next time, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you later.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.